Welcome to the NFL Week 18 betting market outlook, the regular season grand finale. Happy New Year, Kings. I'm back from Europe, spent a week in London, a week in Paris, feeling refreshed. How are your holidays, Judah?
My holidays were pretty great. A little bit sick last week, but that's okay.
Mm.
Powered through. If you joined us on Sunday, I'm sure you heard the remnants of whatever respiratory thing I had. But I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be doing my Wednesday night streams, and we should have a fun week of football ahead.
Yes. And I'm dealing with my own respiratory thing myself, if you can't tell in my voice. But yeah, so now it's 2020 part 3. We're now as close to 2050 as we are to 1996. S&P 500 down 20% in 2022. Tech heavy NASDAQ 100 down 33%. Long duration US Treasuries down another 30% as interest rates just ripped higher over 4%. The Fed doing its best to slow the economy, drive down inflation. Crypto having Lehman moments every other month. Bitcoin off its 2021 highs of 70,000 down, now under 17,000. And of course, the industry crown jewel in crypto, FTX, bankrupt, marked to zero. There was nowhere to hide your money in 2022, but a well-diversified portfolio may have just been the trick. If you bet on Bengals, Giants, Lions, top 3 ATS teams this year going 12-3, 12-4, 11-5, respectively, you'd be up 21.8%, risking 1.1% on each play. And we'll do a proper accounting of our live betting stream returns this season in the coming weeks once things kind of quiet down. But we're up multiples. I know I 5x'd my bookmaker account this season. That helped me buy my girlfriend her Christmas gifts over in Paris this holiday season. But just exemplifies the success that we've had this season amidst a very difficult environment. And now, we kind of creep into a noisy, heavily information-driven, motivation-driven, incentive-driven, really mockery of a week 18. Very difficult to bet, very difficult to handicap. It's going to be an interesting game trade live betting stream on Sunday, trying to figure out, in game, typically our MO is to try to find tactical opportunities for teams that are down, that are mispriced, and that we can bet on them to rally at attractive prices, come back and capitalize on that. But that's going to be there's just not the same variables involved as there are across the previous weeks of the season. So I just feel like I want to be very cautious in this week 18, trying to predict sharp turnarounds potentially. I don't know. How are you thinking about it when it comes to live betting this week 18?
Yeah, I think I kind of, as you said, it can be difficult to kind of rely on the things we've been going back to all year, which is okay, and we'll have the playoffs to really hammer those. I think it's gonna be a props week. I think that's kind of
Good
it's
point.
gonna be markets are gonna have a very difficult time kind of properly pricing player props, and who knows, kind of who's gonna be playing, who's gonna be pulling their starters, which teams are gonna be playing as normal. And I think just kind of paying attention and utilizing the prop market is where most of my focus will be.
Yeah, I like that angle. So I think, as we typically do, we're going to review some of our week 17 drive quality scoreboard, then dive in to our week 18 consensus market power rankings. But we're not going to spend too much time on it because it's probably not that useful going into, again, a very complicated week 18 where these types of variables aren't going to have the same impact. But again, looking at our Week 17 drive quality scoreboard, the three kind of scores that stood out to me was that kind of were misaligned with some of the narrative takeaways about how the market might be kind of framing some of these outcomes. Was, Packers crush the Vikings. Vikings suck. Maybe the Vikings do suck. But I'm not nearly as buying as much into the Packers as much as the market is. Drive quality kind of reinforces that view. So Packers 28 earned points, Vikings 20 earned points. So not nearly the same shellacking as they got through the traditional final score. Another one was Raiders outlasting the Niners. Really impressive performance from Jarrett Stidham. And the Raiders, 35 earned points to the Niners, 34 earned points. And then the last one was the Dolphins. And I know I was, kind of typing and monitoring some of the game trade through halfway of this past Sunday from Paris. And I know we were riding the Dolphins. I thought that was a really great live trade. They came back. And then, of course, the injury, took the lead. And then typical kind of injuries from Teddy Bridgewater, et cetera, kind of started to sink that ship. But the drive quality scoreboard tells us Dolphins 24 earned points to the Patriots 16 earned points. It's really just, again, reaffirming that we're kind of in the right positioning in that game, especially from a live betting
perspective. And they still cashed the 7.5, which was our official bet, which was a nice backdoor cover. I would just add one more to this, and that's I have been, I think, the number one buck seller this entire season from basically week 3 on. I've been like, the Bucks suck. But as our drive quality indicates here, this was a legitimate win.
Yeah.
It's their best offensive performance of the season by far. And also the Panthers defense has been good, kind of by any stretch. And like, look, I'm not ready to jump back on the Buck ship, but that is the ceiling game that the believers have been wishing would come through. And it took until week 17, but it finally did. Whether that will be sticky, it remains to be seen. But it was their first good offensive performance of the season. And that at least bears mentioning.
Yeah, I'm not jumping on
the
Bucks bandwagon by any means, but I've already flirted with this idea a few weeks ago, and you spit in my face. But I'm gonna do it. I'm putting 1 unit on the Bucks to win the Super Bowl at 2,500, just because the NFC is weak. All right, this is pro football. Anything can happen in the playoffs. You got to win 3 games. That's fine. That's enough. And that is more, I think this is mispriced. This is mispriced for the NFC. And if the Bucks offensive line can just not crumble, then I think this has value. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Cowboys to beat them by 10 on Wild Card Weekend. But I do understand the case. And look, I did have a similar view a couple of years back when I bet the Bucks win the Super Bowl, basically saying if everything kind of goes right. So I can't fully dismiss that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
not nearly as antagonistic as you were 3 or 4 weeks ago.
No, certainly not.
All right, so let's go into the Week 18 consensus market power rankings. Kind of top 5, top 8, really. Not a lot of changes. Packers back into the top 10, but did that last week even. The top 5, Bills at number 1, Chiefs number 2, Cowboys number 3, Niners number 4, Eagles number 5. And then to round out the top 10, you got Bengals, Ravens, again, Packers at 8, Chargers, Browns, who are eliminated from the playoffs, in the top 10. Again, Chargers also now sneaking in to the top 10. A lot of late movers here, though, here within the last 3 weeks or so, kind of really since we've been offline here for the holidays. Bucks have definitely moved up. Vikings have moved down.
Steelers,
Packers have moved up.
yeah. A bunch of teams. Dolphins way down. Bucks way down. I just the Steelers, Patriots, and Browns are particularly shocking. I will note though, there's especially from draft quality's perspective, a massive drop off basically from the Ravens onward. That like teams 8 through like 20 are essentially in the same tier of team, and like we're gonna see some fluctuations, kind of week to week. But like this is kind of a shocking endpoint of the season, which I think is going to be important to note, as crazy as it sounds, as we look ahead to next season, of like the taste that's going to be left in people's mouths. Like even if the Packers don't make the playoffs here, or maybe that game is going to be so sour that it will alter opinion. But like there'll be some steam, I think, on the Steelers because of the way they finished. There'll be some steam on the Browns because of the way they've looked and they finished. And I think it's almost an important perspective to keep in mind now to realize kind of what you think of teams and where they're heading, to keep that in mind for this offseason. But as you said, it's a lot of fluctuation. I think specifically for as we're showing now, the Vikings hate has gone too far. I think the take has been exactly the same the entire season. We know exactly what the Vikings are, and now it's like almost because they're so I don't want to say fraudulent, but because their record is so much better than kind of the fundamental play suggests, it's almost like the really hot and sexy thing to be selling the Vikings. But they're the same team they've always been. Nothing has changed about that handicap.
And this is easily one of the biggest 1 week changes that we've seen from the Vikings. And it's happening here in the final week of the season. And that's mostly because I feel like there's been a lot of non-believers in the Vikings. But going into last week, even the non-believers thought the plus 3.5 versus an underwhelming Packers team was definitely mispriced, and that the Vikings was a hard buy. And that was completely wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously, the way that game played out. And again, drive quality still says the game was closer than the final score, but still more than enough to cover the 3.5. Packers definitely was the definitively right side. Because so many people got their feelings hurt on that week specifically, now it's been this like ultra sell-off on the Vikings. And I think that can present some value. I saw some people jumping on Vikings very early for this coming week versus the Bears, getting it at -1, -1.5, whatever. And that turned out to be obviously fantastic because it moved up to 3.5 even before this Fields news came out. So I think some of the most important things as we head into week 18, start looking at some of the matchups. I have some of the kind of playoff scenarios kind of scrolling at the bottom of the screen for those watching the stream. But I think it's worthwhile going over a little bit of what teams need to do in order to actually get into the playoffs or to get the number 1 seed or to win their division. And so just kind of quickly, number 1 seed for the AFC. I don't know if I want to go too much into it because there's just a lot of cloudiness, low visibility around whether or not that Bills-Bengals game is going to be finished or not in some capacity, or if it's going to be a tie, or it's going to be, it's not going to count in any way, shape, or form. And that's really, and that's really going to be dependent on how this ultimately ends up playing out, because it's Chiefs, Bills, Bengals are the 3 teams involved in potentially getting that number 1 seed, and how that Bills Bengals game gets worked out is going to be decisive in kind of deciding some of these outcomes. So a lot of cloudiness there. AFC South title, I think very well documented. Obviously, Jags, Titans, whoever wins is going to be in. If the game ties, I don't want to get too much into the tie scenarios. There's a bunch of weird, if this team ties, and this team ties, then this team's in. It's just so silly. But if the Jags Titans does tie, Jaguars get the benefit of the doubt, given that they have 1 extra win. AFC North title, Bengals get it if they beat the Ravens, or if the Bills tie, or if the Bills Bengals outcome is decided to be a tie. And then the last wild card seed, Patriots. I'm really rooting for the Patriots to lose. One, because if they lose, I'm pretty sure I know mine, and I think maybe both of ours, all of our future win totals will have gone undefeated for this season, with our crown jewel, of course, being the unders on the Raiders, which was like some of the juiciest pricing. I wish, it was beautiful. But Patriots win totals was 8.5, and they're at 8-8. And so if they win, of course, they're going to go over, but they're going to have to beat the Bills in order to do that. And there's a host of other scenarios that could potentially get in, even if they lose. Steelers loss, Jaguars win, and a Dolphins loss could get the Patriots in that scenario. Dolphins are in if they beat the Jets and the Patriots lose. So not too improbable there. Steelers get in if they beat the Browns and Dolphins lose, and Patriots lose. That's also not too improbable. Then the Jaguars can also get in even if they lose to the Titans. They won't win the division, but they would also potentially sneak in with loss by the Dolphins, Patriots, and Steelers. And then on the NFC side, for the number one seed, Eagles get the number one seed if they beat the Giants, or if the Cowboys lose, or the 49ers lose to the Cardinals. 49ers get the number one seed if they win and the Eagles lose. Cowboys get the number one seed if they win and the Eagles lose and the Niners lose. So unlikely scenario there. And then lastly, the number 7 seed for the NFC. This is where there's been a lot of commotion around the actual scheduling of some of these games. That's going to really dictate kind of motivation incentives. Seahawks, Rams is first earlier in the day, and then you get Packers, Lions later in the day. And if Packers win, they're in, it's done. But if the Seahawks lose the first game, then Lions are still alive. If Lions win, then they're in. But if Seahawks win, then they need the Lions to win in order for the Seahawks to get it. So it's kind of like a lot of wishy-washiness.
Yeah. No, they're definitely uncertainty. I was just gonna say that the kneecaps will be bitten. I think Dan Campbell will have his guys ready to play regardless of the outcome of the Seahawks game.
Yeah,
I'm
was
hopeful that we get a like Seahawks win late line movement to the Packers, so I can bet the Lions. But
I totally agree with you. I don't think motivation is going to be that big of a factor for the Lions. They're going to play hard no matter what. I think it's not nearly as good to get into the playoffs as it is to knock out a rival. But knocking out a rival out of the playoffs is certainly sweet.
Yeah. And let these guys play. They give it their all. Yeah.
And the Lions are sitting pretty when it comes to draft position anyway, because they have the Rams pick at number 6 currently right now. And then one of the things I have up on the screen is the current NFL draft order, because this is the other side of the coin now too. So you got all the teams who are trying to win to get into the playoffs or for seeding or to get the bye. But then there's also teams like, well, how hard are they trying? Because like, to what extent do they really want to screw up their potential NFL draft positioning? So Bears are benching Fields, clearly not trying to overtly win this game. Doesn't mean that they're not going to try and win this game, but they're not going to at least explicitly try to win. And that will put them in potential position to get that number 1 seed if Houston wins.
Yeah.
Houston's only a 2.5 point underdog right now to the Colts. And so do you think, like, is Lovie Smith like dumb enough? Is the organization dumb enough? Yes. Okay. Because this is critical. Because I mean, again, if Chicago's not trying to win, if Houston wins, then the Bears get the number 1 pick.
Yep.
And it kind of be totally silly.
I mean, like the Jets lost out on Trevor Lawrence when the whole tank was on there. They'll be playing. I think they'll be playing to win.
Yep.
It
And
is
then
much better
Denver.
as Houston has been playing to win all year, making fun of them for punting on 4th and 1s from the 50 all year, and just the general lack of or just general conservatism that's kind of defined their season. But I think it's not going to be any different than any other week.
Mhm. And then there's again teams that don't have a number one pick. So you got like Saints, Rams, Broncos don't have number one picks. So they should try and win, if at anything, just to ruin their number one pick a little bit worse for the pick that they've given up. So Denver obviously currently sitting at the number 3 pick. They've given that up to Seattle. Rams currently sitting at the 6th pick. They've given up that to the Lions. Saints sitting at the 10th pick. They've given that up to the Eagles. And then also the Browns. Browns sitting at 12th, and they've given that up to the Texans at 12. And then Miami, of course, fighting for playoff berth. So no really questions around incentives there, but they don't even have a number one pick either, as they forfeited that, if you recall, from the whole tampering with Tom Brady and a bunch of that craziness from earlier in the offseason.
Yeah, so I think unusual for the last week of the season, and kind of because of the way the draft order shook out, that like we don't have teams really. If teams like the Rams were just like playing to win, doesn't matter. Draft and Broncos, it's definitely been a rarity.
Yeah. And then there's also some interesting incentives. This is something that I'm not reading too much into it. Also, the market's pretty efficient, so it's probably overreacted to a lot of these incentives since they're very well known, very well documented. You're probably paying a premium to even play the props associated with some of these incentives. But there's some good articles. One by Josh Inglis over at Covers that walks through a bunch of different player stats that they need to hit certain thresholds in order to get certain bonuses. So you can imply that means that maybe the team will put them in positions to try to get that, or the player will really want to try to get that. And then you can extrapolate that to some sort of prop. But again, I think you're probably paying a premium to play
that's
into any
something
of
I want
those
to monitor live.
Live, yes.
I have a list of kind of all of these props, and again, if like we see Gerald Everett is still in the field, we'll just monitor the prices live and see if there's room to capitalize.
Yeah, I think that is the sharpest way to attack this, is because live you can start to get a degradation and a deterioration of some of those premiums that are being baked into some of these prices now live. So yeah, definitely like that, because that is something that you could see, and I have seen this happen before, which is like Khalif Raymond needs like 20 yards or 2 catches or something.
Or
like
just like
at the end of the game, they bring them in.
Exactly. And DeAndre Carter needs 2 catches or whatever. The Chargers have nothing to play for. Like, if there's a prop open for like over 1.5 catches plus 120 or whatever, that's something I just want to have in the back of my head. As we're monitoring.
Yeah. And that's why I would say, like, I wouldn't necessarily say that these incentives, they don't matter. It's just, well, what price are you paying for them to potentially achieve that? Right. And that's where these preseason prices or the pregame prices for these are just out of whack. And so to try to get some of those discounts in game, that could be very attractive. I know I specifically benefited from one of these kind of reaching for a specific stat earlier mid-season when it was DeAndre Hopkins' first game back in like week 7. And he had like 10 catches for 97 yards. And I had a plus 2,200 prop that needed him to get over 100 yards. And the game was over. The game was over. There was no reason to pass. They brought him in, threw the ball to him to get the 4 yards to get over the 100 because he wanted to get over 100 yards on his first game back. So those numbers do matter. And especially late in games, you could potentially see those scenarios arise.
Yep. No, I remember that one clearly. Thursday Night Football, Cardinals Saints.
Yep.
It's true.
Okay, so let's get into what we can make of week 18. Again, I don't think we're going to have too many thoughts, probably run through this pretty quickly, but Saturday, Chiefs, Raiders plus 9.5. Again, Jarrett Stidham looked awesome. One of our buddies, Joe, about Jarrett Stidham even prior to this game. And now he's getting a chance. And I wasn't necessarily a huge believer in Jarrett Stidham, but he did look awesome in that
great.
Niners game.
He looked great.
And all the flack that the Raiders took about, and they didn't back away from Derek Carr in necessarily the most graceful way possible. But maybe this definitely makes them look better for having made that decision at this point and kind of bringing in Jarrett Stidham, where he actually could be a potential quarterback in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, I live bet the Raiders, kind of watching that game and seeing that like Stidham was actually playing well. But I think, look, the Chiefs have had trouble, as we saw again last week, covering big spreads. Like Stidham's capable. I think 9.5 is probably too much. Am I comfortable betting that? Absolutely not. But one idea I had now, kind of as I'm saying it, is combining the Stidham passing yards are not available. But if you want to bet on the Raiders covering that spread, it's probably going to be through Stidham kind of passing at least that expectation or above. So I don't mind combining something like Stidham passing yards and Raiders plus 7.5. You probably get that probably like 270, 280 once those props are released. But I like that angle.
Yeah, that sounds like a very attractive angle. Also, this is in Vegas. When we look at their draft positioning, they're currently situated at 8th at 6-10. And this is a pretty meaningful game if they win or lose it. There's going to be some kind of considerable shifting. I mean, they could lose. I don't know how all these tiebreakers necessarily play out, but you got 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially like 4 or 5 spots they could drop if they win this game.
I'd be surprised if that's what they're looking at. I think certainly the players involved have what to play for, right? If we're talking about a quarterback trying to make a name for himself, he's got everything to play for. And I don't assume we'd see anything different from the Raiders side as we did last week, regardless of kind of their draft standing.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if it's just was the Niners weren't necessarily prepared for what the Raiders were going to necessarily throw at them. But I mean, the Niners are one of the best defenses in the NFL, and the Raiders torched them.
Yeah.
And at 9.5, this seems like a lot. I mean, Dan calls out something that I kind of talk about on KC week after week after week is I hate betting. I will not bet KC at a huge spread. Yeah. This is considered a huge spread. It's over one score. I think it seems too easy to bet the Raiders. In fact, and that's why I like your angle where just lever up into this way, into a particular narrative and try to just hit it big if you can. Yep. And then if you're wrong, then you're wrong. And so be it.
It's the same cost.
But if you're going to be right, then hit a home run.
Exactly.
All right. Titans, the next later evening game on Saturday, Titans, Jaguars, Titans plus 6. Again, a week 18 wild card game. Winner gets in. I know we were talking offline. We were one of those Jags homers in the preseason and also pounding the table on them pretty much all season to our own demise many weeks, but still net positive in the end. But still, we have the battle scars for having bet the Jaguars this season for sure.
I mean, this was the matchup where it hit the 18-1. Lawrence left so much money on the table, by the way, by just going with 300 and minus 2.5. I mean, this for me personally is one I'm navigating, kind of hedging futures. Because I've got a 14-1 ticket on the Jags. I've got some like Tennessee missing the playoff stuff. But to go outside of that, again, similar angle to what we just said with the Raiders, which is that the Titans are perhaps the league's biggest pass funnel, meaning they filter teams to the air rather than the ground. They're number 1 in rush EPA, number 1 in rush success rate, and teams pass over expected against them more than any other. The Jaguars aren't afraid to throw. Lawrence has been amazing since all year, but especially the second half. I'd expect Jacksonville to kind of win through the air. And if you expect Jacksonville to win, I think that's got to be the game angle, which is if betting on Jacksonville, I'd combine it with some Lawrence props, especially against this Titans defense. It's been very, very attackable through the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm super nervous about betting this game pregame.
I mean, it's Josh Dobbs.
It's just these Dan Vrabel teams, and like when there's something that matters and it's on the line, I mean, they just outperform expectation. Just happens all the time.
Mike Vrabel has a way with it. Yeah.
The position that the Titans are even in right now. And remember, this is what I was saying kind of like in the preseason previews was like the Titans look like they're bad. They look terrible on tape on paper. It seems like this team should go way under, miss the playoffs, could be one of the worst teams in the league. I don't know how, but they just like they always outperform expectation. Here they are again. Yeah. Doing it with again a pretty bad team.
Yeah. Granted, they haven't beaten a team with a winning record all year. But even still, yeah, this sounds awfully familiar, like a conversation we've had kind of 5-6 weeks ago, whatever that was. I do think this Titans team is so much worse than the others. They're not starting Ryan Tannehill, but the point is well taken. That I'm not jumping to bet Jaguars as I think I would be in a different spot.
Also, and it hasn't come back to bite them the last few weeks, but the Jaguars are still mistake prone. Still a young team, capable of making bonehead mistakes. I would not be betting the Jaguars -6 here. I'd much rather, like, if the Jaguars are just going to smoke them, then, yeah, lean out into Jaguars -16.5 and think that they're just going to roll. But other than that, this is something I would much rather bet live. Hopefully, even with being led by Josh Dobbs, they can put together a great opening kind of game script, get an early lead, and then bet the Jaguars at a much more attractive price. That's how I would like to attack it.
Right.
Let's move into Sunday. Vikings now out to -7 in Chicago versus Nathan Peterman and the Chicago Bears. Again, congratulations to all those who jumped on the Vikings early on this, getting a ton of key points. Justin Fields, of course, not playing. That really pushed this number up from 3 now out to 7. I got nothing on this one.
Yeah, there's nothing to say. I mean, that's not adding to what you had already. The Bears are not trying to win. You want to back the Vikings with margin, go ahead. I have no interest.
Yeah, what I would say is I feel like the Vikings-Bears play every kind of finale of every season. And then even when there's something meaningful on the line, the Vikings choke and the Bears play competitive football. I think this is going to be one of the first times where the Bears truly have an incentive to lose the game. And for that reason, I think it could be potentially interesting if the Vikings take a bigger lead. This is one of those games where if the Vikings took a meaningful lead, knowing that the Vikings kind of give up leads, have that in their DNA over the course of the season, I think the Bears will be trying hard enough to still make the game relatively competitive. It's still a division game. It's still at home. There's fans going to this game, buying tickets. You can't look blatantly like you're not trying. And that's how you get fined and also the type of stuff and things like that. So I would be looking at the Bears would be one of those teams that are live, even in week 18. I would potentially buy on a meaningful dip.
Yeah, I can hear that.
Browns +2.5 in Pittsburgh. Of course, Browns eliminated. Steelers still playing for that playoff berth. How do you think about this one?
I kind of like the Browns here. I mean, I know Joe is certainly not on the Deshaun Watson train. But I think the Steelers love, and even as we saw in the power rankings up to 12, is a little bit unwarranted. I mean, they haven't played anyone
Up to 10.
12, yeah. Well, the Browns are 10. The Steelers are 12.
And the Steelers are, Steelers up to 12 and Browns up 10. Wow. Yeah,
but
Steelers.
it's just
But
the
we're still,
Steelers
the
have,
drive quality is still very low on the
yes,
Steelers.
a bunch of one-score wins against like, the Colts, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Raiders in the snow when they weren't trying, and the Ravens on Sunday Night Football by 3. Like, this team is not good. They have faced a really easy schedule. This defense is extremely vulnerable and beatable, even with TJ Watt healthy. I think Watson showed some signs last week of coming back, and I just think that the Browns defense has been great in recent weeks. I think we're heading for another slugfest, but I like the Browns here.
And I know you made some great calls live betting the Browns versus Washington this past week, buying the dip on the Browns, even when they weren't looking very good, even when Watson wasn't looking very good through the first quarter and a half or so, but waiting for those fourth quarter Wentz interception, turnover worthy plays, things like that, and it all materialized.
But even it's just a matter of, look, I'm not looking to bet the props, I think, because the volume is so low. The Steelers are extremely attackable deep, and they're allowing kind of one of the highest rates of explosive plays. Watson loves to throw deep. I think the difference in a game where, Pittsburgh's probably going to score 14, 17, 20 points, not a lot. Right, hitting on a couple of those big plays makes a big difference. And I think he'll look to Peoples-Jones, he'll look to Cooper, probably connect on a couple of those. I prefer in kind of a toss-up style game, which I think this will be in the Steelers been playing for months. I prefer kind of leaning into the Browns offense more than I do the Steelers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that angle as well. And I would probably lean Browns. I would love it if it got to 3. Don't think that's probably going to happen pregame. But I think there will definitely potentially be an opportunity to get that live. Now, definitely, lean into Browns. The hype getting a little bit too hot on the Steelers. To your point, I mean, I'm glad you actually pointed this out. This did not even dawn upon me that the Steelers
were like
are up
28.
to 12. That is way too hot.
That's
too hot.
That's what I was saying. Exactly. Like a couple of weeks ago, they were like 26, 27. Nothing, and I don't think anything's like materially changed. They just won a bunch of one-score games.
Yeah, and drive quality still market low on the Steelers at 24.
Yeah.
ESPN 14, PFF 13th, 538 11th, Football Outsiders 16th. And even though we are still cooler on the Browns than the broader market, drive quality has Browns at 18th, still considerably better than the Steelers, and certainly more than enough to cover that 2.5. Jets -1 on the road at the Dolphins, being led by Skylar Thompson. Dolphins again dealing with quarterback injuries galore. Story of the season. Jets, the Mike White hype train, something that I expected early on. Again, he has a few good games, comes back down to earth. Targeted Garrett Wilson like 11, 12 times last week, and Garrett Wilson still only had like 2 catches maybe. Just really poor performance by the Jets as a team. Mike White as a quarterback. And now road favorites again. How do you think about this one?
Yeah, I kind of like the Jets here. Especially, Skylar Thompson has been, I think, a clear downgrade relative to Tua Tagovailoa and Teddy Bridgewater. And the Dolphins have really, really, really struggled in the past couple of weeks defending the pass. Their pass EPA is among the worst in the league. Drive quality tells a similar story. And I think you're right, kind of highlighting the Mike White demise, and you were saying it for a while. But I think there's almost a little bit too much of a overreaction, which is like in the right spots, in the right matchups, I think White can produce, and I really don't think the Dolphins defense, especially if Bradley Chubb is out again, is kind of the tough matchup, as would be in Seattle. I'm ready to back the Jets. Not worried about their motivation, and I'm certainly not leaning into the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson.
Mm-hmm. I just wonder too. It's one of those things where the Jets being on the road again last week versus Seattle, versus a vulnerable defense, and still couldn't take advantage. And so now kind of being lined up with similar variables, not necessarily going across country and playing in Miami is not nearly the same as playing in Seattle. But I wonder if, again, Miami has a lot on the line that, I know you're a big fan of McDaniel and his ability to scheme and put this team in, the best positions possible. That will be enough, even with Skylar Thompson. I feel like the Jets being road favorites is unwarranted. But nonetheless, this
I mean, they're not huge favorites. It's I think a more pick 'em. I'm ready to take the other side of Mike White here. It's a red pendulum.
Yeah.
Mostly the Dolphins defense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I can see that. Bucks +4 in Atlanta. This was as high as 7 with the expectation of Tom Brady, etc. A lot of players weren't necessarily going to play. Now, I believe the last I read, Tom Brady was going to play, at least for part of the game. I think it's uncertain how long, and it really boggles the mind for why he would play. This game means nothing to Bucks, doesn't move their seeding in any way, shape, or form. How are you thinking about this one? This is one of those games where like a lot of the bizarre week 18 variables are in play.
Yeah, I have no interest in betting this game pre-game. 0. Like the Falcons are they're already a team I don't want to bet. Especially in a game no one knows who's playing for the Bucks. I'm passing.
Yeah. One of the things I thought that actually raised some of my eyebrows was, the season win total on the Falcons was 4.5. And, preseason are like, wow, that's way too low. Let's price the Falcons as like they're going to be like a historically bad team. And they did go over the 4.5, but they're only at 5 right now. So it's not like necessarily they kind of blew past it. Which actually, again, like 5 actually seems quite low for the Falcons. Falcons are obviously not a good team. They have their weaknesses. They've had their injury issues. And they've kind of, again, flipped a page, 3-4 weeks ago now by moving on from Mariota. But just quickly, how do you grade that kind of optimism around the Falcons from that 4.5 kind of preseason bet? Good, lucky, or
they're at 6. I think kind of there were 2 kind of handicaps here, right? One was that just like 4 is way too low for any team, right? That was one part. The second was like leaning kind of into Joe's angle that like Mariota's better than people expect, which I think was fine. Now, I was certainly like Arthur Smith, love his play design, love his offense coordinator. There's a bunch of data to back that up. Yeah. But no, I think it was the right bet. I'm not sure we kind of foresaw just how bad the NFC South was going to be, which certainly aided in helping the Falcons get to 6 wins. But again, it like goes to show that most NFL teams are going to at least be capable. Right. In preseason, it might seem very far-fetched for a team to win 5-6 games, but through the course of the season, it's like, yeah, of course, like the Falcons can still win. Like they'll still be in games. They're not a disaster. So I'd
one of the things I want to do once the season's concluded is, do a kind of postmortem on some of our forecasts and whatnot. But I think we were generally right about the NFC South, and saying, because I think that what we were really kind of articulating our thoughts on it was that this was going to be a very competitive division. We were right about that, but it's just they all sucked. Yeah. Not that they were necessarily kind of.
At least they had I had the Bucks under 10.5 at +200, and the Falcons over 4.5. That'll wipe off the Saints losses.
Texans +2.5 versus the Colts. We kind of talked a little bit earlier around how this could potentially affect the number 1 draft pick. Texans +2.5. I mean, under a field goal versus Jeff Saturday's Colts, who have looked terrible the last few weeks. Total 38. is this like a no touch?
Absolutely.
Two very bad teams with
Absolutely.
questionable
There are
motivations.
so many games on Sunday. You don't need to bet this game. You just don't need to do it. There's no reason.
Yeah. Panthers +3 at the Saints. Panthers no longer have anything to play for, although I think that the win total is still in play.
Yeah.
6.5 at 6. Yeah. But otherwise have nothing to play for. Saints also have no draft pick to play for, as we talked about earlier. So nothing to prevent them from trying to win this game. How do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think the Saints are kind of quietly coming along in recent weeks, especially on the defensive side as they've gotten healthier. And even though Marshawn Lattimore came back, had a pick six last week. Again, I don't see the appeal of betting this game. It's almost a tricky handicap, even without the like lack of motivation, because the Panthers have kind of been Jekyll and Hyde, like getting crushed by the Steelers, dominating the Lions, playing a tight one with Tampa Bay. I don't really know what to make of them. It's just not appealing to me.
Yeah. Carolina currently situated in the 9th spot for draft picks. And again, at 6 and 10, they're in that area of where one extra win, one extra loss is going to move you up potentially 5, 6 spots in one direction or the other. So again, to what extent that actually is influencing their decision making, you don't know, but it's again a factor worth, I think, knowing. Patriots +7 on the road going to Buffalo, over under 42.5. Again, a lot of questions around the Bills, of course, whether or not they're going to finish the Bengals game and whatnot, and how that could potentially affect motivation, interest for this game. But Patriots need to win, and then they'll get in. 7 actually does seem quite high. Again, especially if the Bills are going to be like ultra distracted by this game.
I don't think they'll be. I think the opposite of anything. They'll be ready to play. We've seen anecdotally countless stories of kind of teams with a lot to play for. I would be pretty surprised if the Bills don't really show up for this game. And from a like pure football perspective, I've certainly been selling the Bills defense. I just don't think that Mac Jones is capable of kind of exposing them. I think I will be selling the Bills in the playoffs. But I mean, certainly I think the motivation's on their side. Josh Allen is still playing at an MVP caliber. He seems to kind of shaken off any effects of the elbow injury. And I don't think the Patriots are well suited to take advantage of the areas where the Bills are weakest in the secondary. That I'd be backing the Bills here, if anything.
Ravens, another touchdown spread at Cincinnati. Cincinnati also obviously involved in a lot of this chaos. Lamar Jackson also not playing. Ravens don't believe they really have too much to necessarily play for.
Yeah, they're going to be division. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not this one of any of the games. I think most hinges on kind of what happens with the Bills Bengals game, because in theory the Bengals can have nothing to play for, right? If they rule like Bills Bengals as a no game, then they're locked into the 3. But I think if I can use this as a general point of like the Ravens offense is a disaster right now, even without Lamar Jackson. Mark Andrews is their only weapon. They're starting Deshaun Jackson out there, DeMarcus Robinson. The offensive line's been great, but they have no receivers to get open. Tyler Huntley's not the answer at quarterback. Certainly, if the Bengals are playing their kind of full team, I think they should win kind of handily. If not, this is going to be I think, game to fade.
Yeah, I'm not interested in this game either because I don't see how the Bengals and Bills are going to finish that game. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but there's basically no scheduling availability for them to really fit that game in without potentially taking away the week in between the Super Bowl, which that requires a domino effect of reschedulings as well, which I don't think they necessarily want to do either. I'll be curious to see how it plays out, but I don't think that game is going to be played in any way, shape, or form. Giants plus 14 on the road versus the Eagles. Giants locked into the playoffs. Eagles certainly need to win in order to lock it, the number one seed up, lock the division up. This seems like a lot of points for still a division game where the Giants would, even with playing reserves, still pro football players. If this gets out to like the 20s live, I think I would bet the Giants.
Yeah, I kind of see this one playing out similar to Houston Jacksonville last week, minus the just disaster that the Houston Texans are, in the sense of like Jaguars. Right, I don't think they're gonna like have like a bunch of fumbles returned for touchdowns like the Texans did. But what I meant by that is that the Eagles, I think, will kind of play their starters until they get a like pretty big lead. They'll pull them, and then I think both teams are just going to kind of turn the page, get the game over with. I'd bet live under, if anything, just because I can see this as a game in which both teams, the Eagles get their win. It's 21-3 at halftime. The Giants are ready for the wild card round next week. The Eagles, great. They locked up their number one seed. Everyone's moving on.
Yeah, both are trying to get out of the game without any meaningful injuries. I like that angle a lot, especially if you can get an early score and you can get a few extra points tacked onto this. Currently at 43. If you can get above that 45, 46, 47, that would definitely look attractive. Maybe even betting the alt under, going out to 40, getting it plus 205 or whatever.
Yep, absolutely.
Cowboys, Commanders. Cowboys touchdown favorite on the road versus Sam Howell and the Commanders. I think I like the Commanders here. I don't care that the Cowboys need to win. Cowboys need to win a lot of games. It doesn't matter. I think this is like probably definitively the game I like the most.
Wow.
Is Washington plus 7.
I mean, starting Sam Howell, I think that's a kind of massive question mark that I'm not willing to bet on either side, just because I have no idea what Sam Howell's going to look like.
Another quarterback that our friend Joe is very, very, very high on. I think he was talking about, he thought that he was the number one best rookie quarterback of the draft this past season. Wow. Cardinals plus 14 in San Francisco. Hideous game. But I'll get a lot of points. A lot of points.
I mean, David Blau will be playing.
He didn't even look that bad.
He played fine last week. Yeah, I mean, the degenerate in me might throw a little bit of David Blau passing props. Cardinals 7.5. Just because, especially if the Eagles win, what's the motivation here? Maybe the Vikings, if they go 2-3. Yeah, I would just play just so they keep it close. I mean, look, San Francisco was exposed by a different backup quarterback.
Sure.
Last week. But I'm probably gonna lay off this game. It's ugly. There's no need to force it.
Yeah. Tons of points. And a very low total. Again, plus 14 for the Cardinals, 40.5 is the total. Rams plus 6.5 in Seattle, 41.5 the total. Of course, Seahawks need to win to get in and then get that Lions loss. Rams looked really good 2 weeks ago, absolutely destroyed the Broncos, and then came back and looked competitive through the first quarter versus the Chargers, and then looked as bad as some people, as the Bears look like, or the bearish people on the Rams that materialized throughout the rest of that game. I think the Rams will be sufficiently competitive enough to potentially cover this game. They just played 3-4 weeks ago. Rams were in position in that game. Yeah. My only concern would be is if that's like mostly the handicap by most kind of square bettors.
Yeah.
It's like, the Rams almost beat the Seahawks, and for that reason, it's staying under the 7.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seems like a relatively a lot of points for a Seahawks team that's good, but they're, not great.
Yeah, I do like this game in that I think we know there are clear motivations here. The Rams, it's the same as they've been playing for whatever it is, 5-6 weeks now. And the Seahawks are obviously playing to win, try and get in the playoffs. There are a couple live angles I like here, which is that the Rams have been one of the run heaviest teams, even when down by a score. They're very pass heavy when they're up by a bunch, and they're very run heavy when they're down, which leads me to maybe some Cam Akers live props, especially if he's like having some decent success early. The Seahawks have a dreadful run defense. It's really been getting worse as of late. So that I also like the Seahawks went up by a score, have a 31% success rate, which would be 7% worse than the Houston Texans, who are last in the NFL right now if we use the 31 success rate over the course of the season. And they've got a negative 1.2 EPA, which would have them between the Colts and the Broncos as the third worst offense in the league. They're a disaster when they're nursing leads. So I'm kind of looking to maybe back the Rams, maybe back a game under, on the assumption that the Rams are going to keep the ball on the ground, run a few plays, have a bunch of success. But we're talking Cam Akers props, we're talking Rams on the comeback, and maybe the game under, especially if the Seahawks jump out to a lead.
Yeah, I think those are strong angles. Definitely, again, using that to really angle how you want to attack it live, I think is very strong. Chargers plus 2.5 on the road at Denver. Again, Denver, no draft pick. Denver's looked really tough last week versus the Chiefs. They looked tough versus the Chiefs, again, like 4 or 5 weeks ago as well. Beat the Cardinals and then no-showed versus the Rams. But they have showed some life over the last 3-4 weeks.
Yep.
I think the Broncos is a decent side here.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I assume this line's is baking in that the Chargers are not going to be playing their starters. I can't argue against it, but I also don't want to. We're back on our money with the Week 18 Broncos game. It's not doing it for me. It's not doing it for me.
Yeah. I feel you. Lions plus 4.5 at Green Bay. Last game of the season, last game of the night, Sunday Night Football. Again, a lot of this riding on how that Seahawks game plays out. And if the Seahawks win, then yeah, you probably could get the Lions pre-game 6.5. I think we'll move out at least 2 points.
I'm back.
Maybe when you bet them.
Yeah, I'm back in the shirt right here. I'm back in the Lions. Especially if we get news that the Seahawks the Seahawks win and this line moves to 6. Again, I think the Packers' love is kind of spiraling a little out of control as the 8th best team. This is a defense by drive quality that's been the 3rd worst in the NFL over the second half. They're getting destroyed on the run. By the run. We know that the Lions can run the ball. The Packers' offense has kind of emerged as Christian Watson has gotten going. He's at questionable health. And I think the narrative on the Packers is very different without a turnover in the Dolphins game. Like Dolphins go up 27-10 at halftime. I'm not buying the Packers. As our drive quality suggested, this game was probably a little bit closer. The final score says last week against the Vikings. They struggled with the Bears. They struggled to beat the Dolphins. I think that the hype is a little out of control for a team that's really been struggling on defense over the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think it's way out of control. The thing is, I don't necessarily like the Lions, again, outdoors.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got issues with Goff outdoors. But I think this is a run game here. I think this is I saw some cool stats about the Packers defending the here it is. The Green Bay run defense is 4th in EPA per play, 5th in yards per carry, 7th in success rate against kind of zone concepts, and then power and counter, they're 30th in EPA, 29th yards per carry, 32nd in drive success rate. I think the Lions are going to really, really attack the Packers kind of with powers and counter concepts. And I trust Ben Johnson and the Lions offensive staff to issue a game plan that's going to be centered on these types of runs.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, if you were to reset the schedules and kind of start the season from 6-7 weeks ago, I think the market's even much higher on the Lions than they are.
Yep.
Even today. I mean, yeah, the Drive Quality loves Lions, has Lions as top 10 team, top 8 team. The outdoor element is the only thing that kind of worries me a little bit, but in any case, I think, especially pre-game, Seahawks win, Lions move out to 6.5, maybe 7. I don't think it necessarily is 7, but that's when you could get them. And then if the Seahawks lose, maybe the Lions go down to 3.5. But I don't think it's going to go through 3 or even get to 3.
Yeah.
So really asymmetric risk there when it comes to wanting to like position pre-game on this. Any props that you would be thinking for this one, especially given this is an island game, standalone game, the true grand finale of the grand finales.
Yeah, the only like thing
eyes on this game.
That's right. The only angle I'd mention is if the Lions jump out to a lead, they're very pass heavy. Didn't work out last week, but I'd be monitoring Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff props. But again, I want to see if they're utilizing that run, if those runs concepts, or they're running with success against the Packers. But other than that, I don't think so. I think we're gonna have to, wait and see. And it should be a fun one. That's for sure. And I'd love to see the Lions come and win this one.
I believe. Oh, for sure. I mean, first of all, if the Seahawks can lose, and if the Lions get into the playoffs, that would be super fun to watch. Again, I think they're young and mistake prone, so I don't think they would necessarily go very far. But it would still be fun. Khalif Raymond, Jamal Williams, 2 players.
Right. Those are good angles.
Key incentives, especially angling for those live props. I think it'd be definitely super interesting. All right, that wraps up the Week 18 NFL betting market outlook. Thanks everyone for listening all season long. We got some big plans for 2023. We didn't accomplish nearly as much as we wanted to in 2022, but as we go into this offseason, this will be our first kind of full offseason, working together and really getting a lot of stuff done, building a lot of things. We're super excited for what Game Trade can be in 2023. And again, the tools that we're going to bring online to be able to put into practice on streams as well. It's going to be super fun. And I think it's super cool, again, for having, the 100 of you out there who kind of listen to our podcast, watch our streams every single week. We thank you tremendously. You are the true OG Kings for us. And as this brand continues to build up and pick up momentum, you guys are here at the very beginning. So, just again, tremendously grateful. And, again, super excited for everything that's going to come in 2023.
That's right. Echo that sentiment, and we'll see everyone at 1:00 on Sunday.
Yep.
Game Trade is back.
Make some money. Happy New Year, everyone. That's closing bell.